So let's make sure we can see a spinner whilst we are waiting for a response. Let's also make sure that if we enter something invalid, we also get a visual error feedback here on the page. Let's start with the spinner. For that, I'll go to my auth container, and at the very top of it, I'll import my spinner component. It's called spinner, and we get it from components, UI, spinner, spinner. We can really see how these reusable components make a lot of sense in React here. Now I want to display the spinner as long as we are loading. For that, I need to know if we're loading, and we're storing that information in our auth state. For that, I need to get a piece of that state in my auth container, and that of course is a case for const map state to props. There we get the state and can now map a slice of it to our local props. So I'll return an object where I do this mapping, and I want to get the loading state for now. So I'll map state. Now on state, we have to access auth, since this is what leads to the auth reducer in the end, due to combined reducers. So we have to access state auth, and there now the loading property we set up in our auth reducer state, this one here. With that, we got that available here. We need to pass map state to props to our connect function though. And now here in our render method, we can render a spinner. So what I'll do is I'll render either the form or, if we're loading, the spinner. So I'll check after the form was created if this props loading is true, because if it is, then form will no longer be a const but a let, a variable. Then form will be equal to the spinner, just like that, to show a spinner if we're loading. That should be all. With that, if we enter some data here, no matter if it's valid or not, if I submit this, we briefly see a spinner because it's so fast. Now let's also make sure we see error messages if we submit wrong data. And to see that, I of course need to take advantage of the fact that I do store potential errors in my store. So first of all, I need to get that error by adding another mapping in the auth container, error, and that should be state auth error, because I do store any errors in my state here in this error property, and I do that in the auth fail action. With that, I now need to go back to the auth container, and Firebase gives us a nice error message. Your backend might also do this, or you craft your own one. I'm going to take the one from Firebase. And since we have this message, what I can do is I can display an error message. So I can create a new const error message, which by default might be null, and therefore should be a let too. But then I'll add an if statement here. If this props error, if we do have this set, if it's not null, then error message will actually be some JSX, a paragraph let's say, where I simply output this props error, and there, since Firebase gives me that, there will be a message property. Again, this message property is only available because I'm using the error as it comes back from Firebase, and that happens to be a JavaScript object which has a message property. This might not be the case for your own backend, of course. Adjust this to your needs. I want to output this error message element then, maybe above my form. Here, I'll output error message. And of course, we could give this more styling, make it red, whatever we want. Now, before we see something though, we have to ensure that we really store that error. So I have to go to my auth file in the actions folder, and we can access the error message, the error object we get back from Firebase on this error object here by accessing the original response, and that is due to Axios. We're using Axios here, and it simply wraps the response in this error object. And there still we will have data, and there we will have this error object. You can always confirm this by console logging error response, and you will see that you get the same fields as on a normal response, just with an error code. With this, if we save everything and we submit an empty form, we get invalid email. If I now use an email which we already have in use, and I'm not signing in but signing up, we get email exists. Now this clearly is not a nice error message. It would be nicer to get nice text we can easily read. I guess it does say what's wrong though. You can, of course, map these codes to your own error messages. It is something I won't do here for now, but definitely something you can keep in mind as an improvement. Map this to your personal favorite email address. You can always find out which potential errors you can get by having a look at the Firebase Auth REST API documentation here. And there you see common error codes like email not found, invalid password, or for signing up, which we currently tried, that would be email exists, too many attempts, or invalid email as you just saw.